So this is going to be an example of something that the computer calls the Mason-Keres gambit, and I have a great love of Paul Keres. Mason is a player of old, and this opening probably should have been retired like hundreds of years ago. However, I grew up learning that this is the Steinitz gambit, so I'm going to label it Steinitz gambit. So there's probably something wrong with that, and if there is, that's fine. I'll live with it. Now, one of the things that we're doing is black. We're playing the Latvian gambit whenever possible. However, we run into people who play the King's gambit, which we accept, as opposed to playing the Falkbeer, which is perfectly good counter gambit. And this is something where we really need to take a great deal of gratitude in line, because anybody who plays this kind of opening these days is having a lot of fun at chess, and that's what chess is about. If you're not having fun and you're not playing these interesting games, chess is just, dull, grinded out. People find beauty in Karpov style chess, and there is beauty in it, but this is a lot more fun, and I've never played as black against it, and I'm going to show you what I did. And the computer, of course, likes some of my ideas but doesn't like the way I executed them. However, this is interesting. Sometimes these very highly rated players will play this kind of gambit against you, and once again, the principles of unsound chess dictate that what we're trying to do is limit their responses. And so let's look at the game, and we'll unpause it, and we're black, and what we're going to see is that this player plays knight to c3, and even the computer says at this point queen to h4 check is correct, at which point he moves king to e2, and he's not lost. Computer says got to protect it with g5 or d6 or knight to c6. I simply play what I do, the Fischer defense against the King's gambit. Now this move has some merit, and the merit is basically that it allows me to create an absolute pin, because the only way to get my queen out of there is probably playing knight to f3. So when I get a bishop on g4, not only is it pinned against the king, it's pinned against the queen. So I have this thing that's going to sit there forever. That's a good developing move. So now it says I should play g5, which of course I don't. I play knight to c3, and it says it's an even game after knight to f3. Curious how the computer will say that, so let's see why. So what is it trying to prevent? Well, it's trying to prevent recovery of that f-pawn, and it can be recovered, and knight to d5 is coming, and that is something that is important to deal with. So g5 is probably more in order than what I play. Now we pin, and we're allowing him to develop. He moves his knight first, creating a situation that's not as good as simply playing bishop takes. Now the curious thing about bishop takes is that, doesn't it look like just bishop takes knight check, pretty much forces him to take back with the king, and the king's going to be on f3 because he has to cover that bishop on f4. So he sees this, and I see this, so he moves knight to d5. He's going to double cover that pawn, and he doesn't want his king way out there. However, that's the wrong move, so we castle queenside. He plays bishop takes f4, which is fine. I played knight to f6. Interesting. I considered this this was one of the harder moves to find during the game. And, there's lots of things he can do here. He can move, in a variety of ways, but really I'm after the e4 pawn. So he should be retreating his bishop, because he does have this little check issue that is going on. There's lots of ways to go after that bishop on f4 at this point. However, he just takes, and instead of taking back with the queen, I take back with the pawn. So it's interesting. He says taking back with the queen's a better move. I can see why. I mean, bishop to e3 looks like it covers everything pretty nicely, but his king still is in the middle. So I've decided that my pressure is still good, and I still have this threat of bishop takes knight check. And the computer says, well, basically we're in an even game. I didn't do that well. He should be playing c3. But I've given him a chance to blunder here, which he does. And now it says queen to h5 is a killer move that wins the game. Basically puts me up. It wins the game as long as you're Stockfish 8 or Komodo or some amazing engine. However, these things are hard to find for humans, and what we did was play queen to h5. Makes you suspicious, doesn't it? But I had to move my queen because, you know, the absolute pin is no longer there. So now, interestingly, it doesn't give us huge an advantage, and why he would be chasing with h3 at this point is kind of a mystery because, you know, nothing's really pinned. So he decides to break the pin with bishop to e2, which these computers say is a dastardly error. Now notice d5 is coming, and when it does come, bad things are going to happen. So now we play d5. Now it says he's utterly and profoundly lost. He has to play knight to d2. And the d-pawn's going to fall, everything's going to fall, the whole world's going to fall apart. For one thing, as soon as that e-pawn moves, I do have queen to f5 check. And he has to go to e3 to cover his bishop, then I go to e4 with the queen, then I win the bishop. So he has very few alternatives in terms of this bishop. And instead what he does is he pushes. So once again, I have the win of that bishop, which I don't take. Actually, what I'm after here is a checkmate. So it didn't like my move as much as being up 4. I'm up 3.5 or something. So he takes back. And now it says rook to g8, which is not something I played. So rook to g8 is a good move. I simply played f6. Because, you know, after all, if he does take it, I still got queen to f5 check. So I don't think he's going to take it. I think he's going to go somewhere with it, and I'm going to... If you look at where his escape routes are, they're to the queen side, and the most difficult one to go after is back to e1, like via e3 or d2. So I want to get those dark squares taken care of. So he retreats all the way back, and now it says rook to e8 is the killer move. Now, I must admit that rook to e8 is a bit of a mystery to me, because it just looks like it's setting up bishop to h6 or knight checks or something, but instead I move my bishop. So now it gives him a defense. Now all of a sudden this game's not lost anymore if he has the sense to move king to c3. Imagine that. If he moves king to c3, he escapes. So one could say that rook to e8 was a preventative for that move. King to c3 is a way for his king to escape, so that's why the computer has analyzed it and why I'm not as good as the computer. However, I contend I still have a winning game here. It's not a forced win according to perfect play, though. It is against humans, pretty much. So knight to h4, see what he sees coming is the check on f5 or g6 or something like that, and then he's going to flee to the queen side, and I'm going to then go after him with either queen or rooks. So at this point he loses his queen, if you'll notice. So the game's over at this point after this blunder, but this was a very difficult position to defend. And a king to c3 and maybe following it up with, you know, getting the pawn on b3 and retreating it back, or maybe even moving it further. It is more difficult to attack over there, and Steinitz used to do this stuff where he'd march his king all over the place and castle by hand and win. So obviously the check is bishop takes, queen takes, knight to b4 check, which is what happened in the game, and then the queen's loose. And then checkmate happens quickly thereafter, so we'll just show you what happens. End of game. So this is an example of the Steinitz Gambit, and I hope you enjoyed it.